Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're taking a look at social media algorithms.
Ooh,
Like the things that decide what we see online.
right.
And we have a super interesting article here that goes into how they work,
Mm-hmm.
how they've changed over time,
Mm.
and how they might be affecting not just, what we see, but actually how we think.
It's really crazy how we've gone from, chatting around the water cooler at work
Yeah,
to this whole global digital village where like billions of people are sharing information all the time.
right.
But all that content, right? It's like it created this need to like organize it all somehow.
Yeah, it's like drinking from a fire hose.
Totally.
I remember back in the day, with early Facebook in the mid 2000s, everything just showed up in your feed in order of
Eh,
when it was posted.
Yeah,
But these platforms just blew up.
totally.
Things had to change.
For sure, for sure. Think about it. If you're connected to hundreds of friends and pages, there's no way you could keep up with everything in real time.
Just couldn't.
That's where algorithms came in. And not to like control us or anything, but to filter and prioritize all that information.
Right.
Facebook's news feed, back in 2006, that was a big turning point
Yeah.
going from, everything in order to this algorithm deciding what we see.
So instead of seeing everything,
Yeah.
we started seeing what the algorithm thought we wanted to see.
Right. Exactly.
But how did those early algorithms even work? How did they decide what to show us?
So they started with pretty simple stuff. The article actually gives this example of a user, Alice, who has 300 friends,
Okay.
and she could be getting like 1,000 updates a day.
Wow, yeah.
So to like avoid overwhelming her, the algorithm had to be picky.
Right.
It started by looking at like how close Alice is to the person posting, the kind
Mhm.
of content she usually interacts with, and how recently the post was made.
So if Alice is always interacting with her friend Bob and liking his photos, the algorithm would prioritize Bob's new photos over a super long news article from a page she rarely looks at.
Exactly, exactly. It's all about making things personal for each user.
Yeah.
And Facebook took that idea even further with their EdgeRank algorithm.
Okay, so what was so special about EdgeRank?
Like what made it different?
Yeah, what made it different from those first algorithms?
So EdgeRank brought in this whole idea of weighting different things. Like it looked at affinity, which is basically the connection between a user
Yeah.
and the person who made the content. Then weight, meaning like how important different types of content are.
Oh, okay.
Like photos might be weighted differently than, say, links, and then time decay, which basically means newer content was shown first.
I see. So EdgeRank took those basic ideas like closeness and stuff
Right.
and made them more complex.
More nuance.
Yeah, more nuance. But let's be real, algorithms today are way more advanced than just looking at how close you are to someone or when they posted. So how did we go from EdgeRank to the super complex systems we have now?
That's where artificial intelligence and machine learning come in.
Okay.
Remember that social graph idea?
Ugh.
Think of it like a giant map
Mhm.
of all your connections and everything you do on a platform.
Yeah, yeah.
Modern algorithms analyze that whole map and tons of other data
Oh.
to really personalize what you see.
So it's not just about who you're connected to, but how you actually interact with them.
Exactly.
So if I always like and comment on Bob's posts, but rarely do anything on Sarah's posts,
Yeah.
the algorithm thinks I'm closer to Bob and shows me more of his stuff.
Yeah, you got it. And it goes even deeper than that. These modern algorithms with machine learning,
Right.
they analyze hundreds, maybe even thousands of different things. They use all sorts of data to like predict what you'll find interesting.
Wow.
We're talking about looking at everything from the like emotions in text posts to how images are laid out to how long you watch videos. They even factor in like where you are, what time it is, and what device you're using.
That's kind of creepy when you think about it. Every click,
Yeah.
every scroll, every time I pause, it's all being tracked.
Right.
I mean, it makes sense if it's trying to personalize things, but it makes you wonder, how much control do we actually have over what we see?
That's a great question. And that leads us to one of the biggest things to think about with algorithms,
Hmm.
the impact of all this personalization.
You mean beyond just deciding if I see more cat videos or cooking tutorials,
Right?
could these things actually have a bigger effect?
Oh, absolutely. It's like that butterfly effect thing.
Oy.
Even little actions like liking a post or commenting on an article
Yeah.
can have ripple effects. They affect what you see
Right.
and what other people see too. The article uses this example of like a news story about COVID-19 vaccines to
Uh-huh.
show how this works. Let's say you see this story and, You're curious, so you click on it. Maybe even leave a comment saying you're pro-vaccine.
The algorithm's watching.
Right.
Right. It's like, okay, this person is into health stuff.
Yeah.
And start showing me more of that. So it's
Yeah.
like, the more you click, the more you see. But how does that affect anyone else?
Okay, so let's bring your friend Bob back in. You and Bob are connected.
Yeah.
So the algorithm, knowing you were interested in that vaccine story,
Right.
might show it to Bob too, even if he hasn't shown any interest in vaccines before.
Okay.
Now Bob sees it, maybe he shares it with his friends,
Yeah.
and suddenly that story is spreading way faster
Wow.
than it would have on its own.
So like my clicks and likes can actually change what other people see?
Exactly.
And that could even change public opinion on big issues.
It could.
That's kind of scary.
It is. And that brings us to this idea of echo chambers and filter bubbles.
Ooh, yeah.
You've probably heard those terms before,
I have.
but let me explain.
To be honest, I'm not really sure I understand them.
Okay.
Like they sound kind of ominous. What are echo chambers and filter bubbles exactly?
Okay, so imagine a room where every word you say just bounces right back at you.
All right.
That's kind of what an echo chamber is like online. It's where you mostly see information that agrees with what you already believe.
Yeah.
It creates this loop where your own opinions just keep getting stronger.
I can see how that happens. You
Yeah.
start following people and pages that agree with you.
Right.
The algorithm picks up on that, and bam, you're only seeing stuff that confirms what you think.
Exactly.
But what about filter bubbles? Is that the same thing?
They're similar, but a filter bubble is more about how those algorithms can, like, trap you in this little world of information that agrees with you and keep out anything different.
So instead of seeing like all sides of something, I'm just stuck in this bubble,
Yeah.
oblivious to anything that might challenge my perspective.
Exactly. Remember Alice and Bob with their totally different political views?
Yeah.
Because of what they do online, Alice's feed might be full of, like, articles from liberal news sources. Right.
Well, Bob's is all conservative viewpoints. They could live in the same city,
Yeah.
deal with the same problems, but their online worlds could be totally different.
That's kind of freaky when you really think about it. Like, we're all living in these separate universes,
Right.
completely cut off from any ideas that don't match our own.
And that's one of the biggest worries about these algorithms. By like reinforcing our biases
Yeah.
and keeping us from seeing other viewpoints,
Right.
they could make us even more divided as a society.
That's true.
It's like it makes it harder to have real conversations and find common ground.
It's easy to think of algorithms as, like, neutral, just showing us what we like.
Yeah.
But are they really that neutral? I mean, they're made by people, right?
You're totally right to question that.
Yeah.
While the algorithms themselves might not be biased, on purpose,
Mm-hmm.
they're built and trained by people
Right?
using data that can reflect like real-world prejudices. This reminds me of that thing I read about a facial recognition program that kept misidentifying Black people.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a pretty clear example of how algorithmic bias can have real consequences.
It is, and it's something that platforms are trying to figure out how to fix. The article talks about how Facebook has tried to add, like, what they consider authoritative news sources
Right.
into people's feeds, especially during elections, to fight misinformation.
I mean, that sounds good, but isn't it kind of risky to have a company deciding what's authoritative?
Yeah.
Like who gets to choose?
Right.
And what about censorship? That feels like a slippery slope.
Those are really important questions.
Yeah.
And there aren't easy answers. It's a tough balance between wanting to stop harmful stuff from spreading and also protecting free speech.
Right.
But the fact that these platforms are at least trying to find solutions
Yeah.
shows that they know these algorithms have a big impact.
So where do we go from here? Are we just stuck in these echo chambers and filter bubbles forever? Or is there hope for a better, more balanced online experience?
I think there's hope.
Okay.
And there are things we can do, both individually and as a society.
Yeah.
One big solution is transparency. We need to know more about how these algorithms actually work.
Like making the secret recipe public.
Exactly. Imagine if we could actually see how an algorithm weighs different factors.
Yeah.
Or change the things that control what it recommends to us.
Yeah. That would be amazing.
It would give us so much more control.
But even with that, wouldn't we still need to like actively seek out different viewpoints?
Oh, absolutely. We can't just passively take in whatever the algorithm gives us.
Yeah.
We need to be more proactive about what we see online.
So how do we do that? Like, what are some practical things we could do?
One simple thing is to diversify who you follow.
Okay.
Make an effort to include people and pages from different backgrounds,
Yeah.
different perspectives, even people you might not agree with at first.
That makes sense.
The more diverse our feeds are, the less likely we are to get stuck in those echo chambers.
But what about the bias built into the algorithms themselves? How do we deal with that?
Alongside our own efforts, we need the platforms to change.
Okay.
They need to be more open about their algorithms,
But
fix the
they-
biases in their data, and
Yeah.
design systems that actually promote diversity and balance.
So it sounds like algorithm literacy is going to be a crucial skill in the future.
Totally. We need to understand how these algorithms work,
Mm-hmm.
how to spot bias and misinformation,
Right.
and how to use them to our advantage without being manipulated.
Yeah.
It's like reading the fine print before you sign something.
Yeah.
We need to be informed about how we get information in this digital age.
It's not about hating on algorithms. It's about understanding their power
Yeah,
and using them responsibly.
exactly. And there are already some platforms trying to do things differently, which
Yep.
is great.
Yeah.
The article mentions Blendle, where you can customize your news feeds so you're not just stuck with what the algorithm thinks you want.
Oh, cool.
And I remember reading about All Sides, which shows news stories from different political viewpoints
Right.
so you can compare and contrast different perspectives.
Those are awesome examples of how platforms can give users more control
Right.
and promote a more balanced online experience.
Yeah, it's a work in progress for sure.
Yeah.
It takes collaboration, new ideas, and a willingness to learn and adapt as we go.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I get it now, how much power these algorithms have in shaping what we see online.
And it's worth thinking about how those algorithms might even be affecting how we think,
For sure.
not just what we see.
That's a good point. So for everyone listening, here's something to consider. Knowing how these algorithms work, how can you become a more aware consumer of information online?
Right, exactly.
What steps can you take to break out of your own echo chamber?
It's a question we should all ask ourselves. It's so easy to get lost in scrolling,
Yeah.
but taking a moment to question what you're seeing and why can make a big difference.
Totally. Don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone and explore different viewpoints,
Yeah.
even ones you might not agree with at first. It's about being in control of your online experience,
Exactly.
not just letting the algorithm decide what you see.
And remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about how these things work,
Right.
the better you'll be at navigating the online world and making good decisions.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of social media now.
It's been really interesting for me, too.
Yeah.
There's still so much more to learn about all this, but hopefully this deep dive has given you a good foundation. We'll know.
Definitely. And for our listeners, be sure to check out the show notes for links to that article we talked about today.
Yeah.
There's tons of info out there if you want to dive deeper into this.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep
Yeah.
those algorithms on their toes.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the world of social media algorithms.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening.
You've probably heard those terms before, but let me explain.
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure I understand them. It sounds a bit ominous. What exactly are echo chambers and filter bubbles?
Well, imagine a room where every word you speak bounces right back to you. That's kind of what an echo chamber is like online. It's an environment where you're primarily exposed to information that confirms your existing beliefs, creating this feedback loop where your own opinions are constantly reinforced.
Okay, I can see how that could happen. You start following people and pages that align with your views, the algorithm picks up on that, and suddenly you're only seeing content that agrees with you. But what about filter bubbles? Is that the same thing?
They're closely related, but a filter bubble is more about how personalized algorithms can create a sort of information cocoon around you, shielding you from diverse perspectives. It's as if the algorithm is saying, we know what you like, so we're only going to show you that.
So instead of getting a balanced view of the world, you're just stuck in this little bubble, oblivious to anything that might challenge your perspective.
Exactly. Remember Alice and Bob with their contrasting political views? Because of their online activity, Alice's feed might be filled with articles from liberal media outlets, while Bob's is dominated by conservative viewpoints. They might live in the same city, deal with the same issues, but their online realities could be drastically different.
That's a bit frightening when you think about it. It's like we're all living in these parallel universes, completely isolated from any perspective that doesn't align with our own.
And that's one of the biggest concerns about these algorithms. By reinforcing existing biases and limiting exposure to different viewpoints, they have the potential to exacerbate societal divisions, making it even harder to have productive conversations and find common ground.
It's easy to think of algorithms as neutral tools, just reflecting our own preferences back at us. But are they really that neutral? After all, they're created by humans' rights.
You're absolutely right to question that assumption. While the algorithms themselves may not be inherently biased, they are built and trained by humans using data that can reflect and amplify existing societal prejudices.
This reminds me of something I read about a facial recognition program that kept misidentifying Black people. That's a pretty clear example of how algorithmic bias can have serious real-world consequences.
It is a serious issue, and platforms are grappling with how to address it. The article mentions how Facebook has tried to insert what they consider authoritative news sources into people's feeds, especially during elections, as a way to combat misinformation.
While that might sound good in theory, isn't it a bit risky to have a company deciding what's authoritative? Who gets to make that call? And what about concerns about censorship and limiting free speech? That feels like a slippery slope.
Those are important questions, and there are no easy answers. It's a delicate balance between wanting to mitigate the spread of harmful content and respecting freedom of expression. But the fact that these platforms are trying to find solutions shows that they recognize the potential impact of their algorithms.
So where do we go from here? Are we destined to live in these echo chambers and filter bubbles forever, or is there hope for a more balanced and informed online experience? What can we do to break out of these bubbles?
There is hope, and there are definitely things we can do both as individuals and as a society. One key solution is transparency. We need more insight into how these algorithms actually work.
You mean like making the secret sauce of the algorithm public? I think we have a right to know what factors are being considered and how they're influencing what we see.
Right. Imagine if we could see the weighting system of an algorithm or adjust the factors that determine our recommendations. It would give us a lot more control over our online experience.
That would be amazing.
Ah.
But even with more transparency, wouldn't we still need to be proactive about seeking out diverse perspectives?
Absolutely. We need to be active participants in curating our own online experiences, not just passive consumers of what the algorithm throws our way.
So how do we do that? What are some practical steps we can take?
One simple step is to diversify the people and pages you follow. Make a conscious effort to include voices from different backgrounds, different perspectives, even those you might initially disagree with.
That makes sense. The more diverse our feeds are, the less likely we are to get stuck in an echo chamber. But what about those underlying algorithmic biases? How do we address that?
Well, alongside individual efforts, we need systemic change. Platforms have a responsibility to be more transparent about their algorithms, to address biases in their data sets, and to design systems that promote diversity and balance. And this is where regulation and public pressure can play a role.
It sounds like algorithm literacy is going to be a crucial skill in the future.
Exactly. We need to understand how these algorithms work, how to spot bias and misinformation, and how to use them effectively without being manipulated. Think of it like learning how to read the fine print before you sign a contract. We need to be informed consumers of information in the digital age.
It's not about demonizing algorithms. It's about understanding their power and using them responsibly, both from the platform side and the user side.
Precisely. And there are already some inspiring examples of platforms trying to do things differently. The article mentions Blendle, a platform that lets you customize your news feeds based on your interests, so you're not limited to just what the algorithm thinks you want to see.
And I remember reading about All Sides, a website that presents news stories from different political viewpoints side by side, encouraging readers to compare and contrast different perspectives.
Those are great examples of how platforms can empower users and promote a more balanced and informed online experience. But it's an ongoing process. It requires collaboration, innovation, and a willingness to learn and adapt.
Wow, this deep dive has really made me think about the power of these algorithms
Yeah, for sure.
and how they shape what we see online.
And it's not just what we see, right? It's maybe even how we think, too.
Exactly. It's worth considering. So everyone listening, here's something to think about. Knowing how these algorithms work, how can you be a more conscious, aware consumer of information online? Like, what steps can you take to break out of your own echo chamber?
It's a question we all should ask ourselves, really. It's
Yeah.
easy to get caught up in scrolling, but just taking a second to think about what you're seeing and why, that can make a real difference.
You're right. Don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone, explore different viewpoints, even those you might not agree with right away. It's about being in control of your online experience. not just letting the algorithm call all the shots.
And remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about how these algorithms work, the better you'll be at navigating the online world, making smart choices.
That's a great point. This conversation has been so thought-provoking.
Yeah,
I feel like I understand social media in a whole new way now.
that's great to hear. It's been a really interesting exploration for me, too.
Yeah, for sure.
There's so much more we could dig into, but hopefully this deep dive has given you a good starting point.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, don't forget to check out the show notes for links to that article we discussed. There's a ton of information out there if you want to go even deeper into this.
Yeah, check it out.
That brings us to the end of our deep dive into social media algorithms. Thanks for joining us.
And thanks for listening, everyone.